Hello, welcome to another Amusing Panda live stream, your musing and amusing source for all things War Machine. This week, we are going to do a big postmortem analysis on the World Team Championships and dive into the results. I have a number of guests with me this week, but first, we're going to start it off with the indefatigable Chris Taylor.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me back. Cosmo, I don't think I'm on the screen yet,
Oh
but
yeah, that's
there we all are.
All right, spoilers. Here we go.
Just a voice from the cloud talking to y'all. Howdy, y'all. Nice to be back. Thanks for having me.
And then we've got Ryan Chiriboga from the Spell Rack. Say hi, Ryan.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me again, Alex. I really enjoyed the first time on the show, so very glad to be back.
Yeah, glad to have you. And we are joined by Joe from Tyrants on the Field.
Hey, Alex, how you doing tonight?
Doing good. I am super pleased to have this crew of people here with me. Ryan and Joe, in particular, earlier this week, did excellent work on their channels. So that'd be Tyrants on the Field and Spell Rack. Check links in their description for both their shows. Go over there and give them support. But yeah, you guys did a lot of numbers crunching up front and looking at the state of the WTC meta and what the winners and losers were at a faction level. I guess real quickly, just on the note of winners, huge congratulations to Team England Paddington. They took down the whole thing. This Sunday, we're still hashing out the final details of timing, but this Sunday, I will also be doing a live stream interview with all of Team Paddington, talking about their selection cycle, their prep cycle, what their insights and thought processes were, and how it all panned out for them. So stay tuned for that.
Are you going to try to get to the root of the fact that it was an inside job?
I mean, you've got the lead developer of War Machine on the team. What do you expect?
I mean, Steamforge clearly had a plan. No, actually, in all seriousness, this game is harder for Jamie Perkins to play than any of the rest of us.
Oh, I know.
Do you know how many versions of rules are in that man's head to have to sit down and play with the current rule set with everything that he knows in addition to, and then to remember the stats? It's actually quite the opposite of a plan.
Oh, yeah.
I'm incredibly impressed by his performance.
Yeah. I mean, it also helps when you're live editing the app in the middle of WTC, just changing stats.
Hey, if you've got the power, do it. And speaking of, shout out to Rich Loxham for going ahead, being at WTC, doing the whole thing, and then getting on stage for 2 minutes and turning it into a business trip. That was absolute gold. Gets to expense the whole thing. Wonderful.
Oh, brilliant. All right. Well, let's move into the event itself. So rather than coming at this from a boots on the ground perspective, we are going to take a look at sort of the state of the metagame and what we can learn from what happened there. Top level metagame observations. For months now, we've been seeing stats in Longshanks with casters like Kythos and Zadaroth dominating standings, dominating large events, and doing really, really well. And it seems like their streak ran just long enough for the metagame to adapt.
I'd definitely say that Kythos and Zadaroth and their ilk didn't have the best time at WTC. It seems like the teams that were in attendance figured them out.
I think if you were paying attention at all for the past 6 months, you had to have some kind of plan for a def skew. And every team had multiple plans for a defensive skew. If you look at the list, if you look at the tech choices in most of the list that performed well, almost everyone on their team had some type of plan for a defensive skew list that they had if they had to play into it. And when you do that, and you're able to curate matchups to an extent, you're going to get the result that you saw out of Kythos and them, which again is not a bad result. It's a 49% win rate. Still, it's a coin flip. It's what you would expect at a high level tournament where variance is going to be a little bit stronger, simply because the skill level is so high across the board that variance becomes much more a part of the mix in these games.
And we have seen Kythos and the defensive lists coming down kind of week to week as the meta's been tracking just in general in singles tournaments. Kythos had started, I believe, around like 58, and it's just slowly been trickling down. I think going into the event, Kythos was maybe a 53.
Yep.
And Crix itself had fallen from, 56 to 50. And then, as you said, Kythos came in at 49, what Zadaroth was at 53. And then you kind of get some other casters caught up in the mix. Poor Jakes. Jakes had a 33% win rate.
Jakes did not have a good weekend.
Yeah, Jakes was terrible. And you just have to wonder, I mean, even though Jakes is a very different list, it's still a +2 defense feat.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're running into everybody that's got an answer for that, like you're just that much more behind. And Gravediggers, who had a wonderful performance, it's amazing how bad Jakes was, and they still put up the high win rate that they did.
Yeah, I think I ran the numbers on them, and if Jakes wasn't in the mix, Gravediggers were the best performing faction at WTC.
I bet, yeah.
I believe it.
Man, yeah, that's what. So just to comment, Jakes did have remarkably less play than Vargas did. And I think that's one thing that just comes with the territory of the WTC. is you're because the teams are doing the matchmaking game, it's way easier to dodge silver bullets than to deliver one. So you have a strong tendency to play even-ish games. I think as we get deeper into it, and what performed disproportionately well, I think that probably tells us also some things about where the metagame is currently and maybe long run balance implications. Although with a January update, we might not ever get there. But yeah, for Gravediggers, like Vargas is a fantastic generalist. He can play into most of the field very, very comfortably. And if you're going to a singleton War Machine event, Jakes is the natural partner. She is a fixer for a lot of things that Vargas doesn't want to see, but Vargas, like the team matchmaking game, is also a great fixer for things Vargas doesn't want to see. And it was interesting to see McCoy, who was not very highly regarded by most of the community, really step into his own at this event. Now, he didn't have like a phenomenal win rate, but he was really, really, really solid. Yeah. And I think deviating from how you would play a singleton tournament there, like, the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, he had around a 55% win rate for the event, and he'd been trending up. If you look at his performance at the, I believe the Welsh Masters, he did very well at that, and then the event just before that in Europe. Now he's much more regarded in Europe than he was in the States. I think part of it was he was a little bit late getting to the States in the cycle. And because of that, there was sort of a bias that had formed around Vargas and Jakes, as Jakes sort of solved, or theoretically solved, the colossal issue that the Gravediggers have. But in practice, it didn't work out the way that it was intended to.
And it does also seem that all the Gravediggers players in the past 6 to 8 weeks have figured out we should just run 4 units of Rangers. 4 units of Rangers is absolutely busted. And you saw that, especially at the Belgium Masters, you did see that list with Jakes, but then with McCoy, somebody help me. There was a player whose his list name was can you make it across the battlefield by turn 2 or something like that? And it was a McCoy list, right? And it's right there in the label. This is, I am going to shoot you off the board. And Alex, you mentioned, silver bullets are hard to deliver at the WTC, and you're absolutely right. That team format makes it hard. But I promise you, there were a couple of times where that Boom Boom McCoy player walked into a pairing and said, like, they just can't handle this many guns, and I've got this one.
And it's also a matchup that if you haven't played it, you're not going to quite understand the threat that it poses, or you may not understand it just looking at the list itself. It's once you play it and you realize how all of the CRAs and volume fires and D3 shots interact, you realize this list has a lot of shooting, and it's got enough shooting that it would hold with a Mark III army or a Mark II army in terms of size. This is Mark IV. We're playing with fewer models. That's an issue.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had the distinct challenge of playing against McCoy list piloted by Luke Rowan at the Mox event earlier this year. It's a terrifying amount of firepower, and I'm looking at that list. I'm like, well, it's my turn 2. I'm going to lose my king on his next turn, basically regardless of what happens. So let's just YOLO this guy and see how much he can kill before that happens.
Yeah, you can't get out of the range. I mean, somebody walks 6, place 2, base size, shoot 12. It's like a 21-inch threat from each of the 4 units. Throw on some fire for effects, the CRAs. It's just nasty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing that I didn't add to this, but a lot of factions pulls over 50% win rates, and I think what enables that disproportionately among prime factions is that they're pulling those percentage points off of legacy factions. I mean, legacy faction participation this year was really low versus 22, where maybe 2 players on a team were running prime factions, maybe 3, or even 23. It was still about like 3 and 2 prime and legacy for a lot of teams. And it seems that they're just slowly being pushed out by a variety of factors. One, I think, is the consistency that spell racks and customizable jacks enables. The other is just like there's so many more incidental guns in prime armies now. It's like having a unit of sword dorks is almost a curse, whereas it was a staple in past editions. Like, your sword dorks don't carry guns. Ooh. So even for armies that aren't dedicated to shooting, they still put down a surprising amount of firepower and can mix up with the prevalence of dual attack, their ability to wipe things in melee, and then clear incidental guys to soften up the retaliation. And Mark II, Mark III armies just weren't designed like that. And I think they're, one, the field of players has estimated that their stock is dropping, and 2, I think the results show it as well.
I think that's part of the factors that play into it. I think some of the other things that are playing into it as well is, for a majority of the majority of legacy or whatever they're calling them now, of factions, they may have 1 or 2 casters in a segment of the army that's playable, but they don't have a solid off pair. And the lack of the solid off pair really inhibits them in tournament play, let alone in a team format. So choosing to play a legacy army can have some advantages. We saw Final Interdiction be absolutely monstrous at the event. The few players that took it performed very well.
Do you think that was a metagame call to where we were with defense?
I believe so.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like it's just like, oh, Krios 2 auto hit. It's like auto hit on a ton of weapon masters, so like armor is also less challenging.
The interesting bit was Cyrenia was actually the most dropped caster in Final Interdiction, and she had a 50% win rate.
Oh, she's got positive charge. She does both too.
Yeah, she's fantastic. But it was good to see Menoff do well, at least part of it. Again, that's where I started in the game in Mark II was Menoff. So
someday, was, Mark IV Menoff coming someday. I'm keeping the hope alive.
just praying, fingers crossed.
Keeping the faith.
There was the one Retribution player who went 5-0, and he played Gareth, I think, the entire time.
Yep.
Yes.
And I had to look him up. He's kind of looks like a pretty interesting sniper sort of warcaster, but it's one of these where I have that memory lapse where I didn't play for 7 years, and I'm thinking, who is this guy? What does he do? If I played against him, all my reps are against Mark IV factions, so you have a little bit of a dark horse factor there. But yeah, he went 5-0, played the same list the whole time. But I guess that highlights your point of not having an off list, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have the right solve and the right pieces, you just one list it.
Right. Absolutely. No. Yeah. Man, 2019, I spent so much time agonizing over my second list because I had Makeda Exalted in the first one. I'm like, oh, Jalam or this or that. I put so much brain power into it. Go to the event, 6 rounds of Makeda. Jalam's just on for show. May as well have left him at home. A lot of WTCs go like that. But there's another adaptation that or rather more prominently the lack of an adaptation. So, because we've had a long time of proving out, like the shape of the metagame, I feel like really started to emerge and clarify by about May this year. And then, over the course of the summer, there was a lot of just proving out and seeing how implementation worked. One of the implementation things was the trike and its impact on the metagame. So initially, trike lists were super vulnerable on scenario because the Colossal is so expensive and their units are so expensive. And you have to staple on Wormspine Shadowmancers. Otherwise, the Colossal is just going to get hosed by a whole host of problems and on and on and on. Partway through the year, Shadow Flame players figured out how to solve the list comp problem and bring enough activating modules. And player, team composition, what was it? Shadow Flame Shard was on more than half the teams. Is that right?
Yeah, they were the most played faction. They had 18 people representing them. There was no duplication on a team, so 18 separate teams had shard players, and there were 32 teams at the event. So yeah, over half.
So the Trichomerax is one of the models that was over the course of the summer starting to define the metagame. Joe, defense skews were solved. Was the trike solved? Take us through the math.
So looking at it, and I looked specifically at the top 9 players of Shadow Flame Shard at the event. 8 of 9 of those players had a trike in their pairing. The trike was dropped 25 times over the 45 games. And the trike won 21 of those 25 games. 2 of the losses were in a mirror match. So do with that what you will. So for the top half, you had a 55% drop rate for the trike and an 84% win rate for the trike. So I would say, based on how the top half performed at WTC, with the 9th player being a 2 and 3 player, who went 2 and 1 with the trike in the games that he dropped it, the trike was not solved. I think there were armies that could play into it. I think there were armies that had a plan for it, and I think there were some fixes in lists for it. But in terms of solving, not at all.
Mm-hmm.
How do the statistics? And I don't mean to put you on the spot. But the bottom half of the players, Was the trike still heavily featured?
Trike was still heavily featured. There were 18. There were 18 players, and there were 18 trikes. Only one player didn't take a trike, and one player put a trike in each of his lists, and that was Poland Ard's player.
Okay. It's interesting to see how strongly the trike performed, but the faction overall did poorly.
There's interesting bits there as I was going through the trike matchup. Where you saw Shadowflame perform poorly was mostly in the bottom half of the meta. Once you got to about the 5th player and Shadowflame Shard, they were 3 and 2 until the 9th player, and then they were 2 and 3, and then the bottom fell out. The biggest difference between teams that performed well and teams that did not were the matchups that they were getting Shadowflame Shard into, or more specifically, not allowing Shard to play into.
Yeah.
So I think the real story there is if you have Shadowflame on your team, you need to curate their matchups a little bit more than some teams were able to. The least performant of the best performing Shadowflame, or the least performant of the Shard players that were on high performing teams were actually the Australian players. The Australian players had very tough goes over the course of their matchups, and I think part of it was just how the matchup sort of fell out for the rest of their team. It looked at some points like they were probably taking a bullet that was enabling some of the other teams to play a little bit better into. And sometimes that happens in a team event.
Alex, I'd be really curious once you talk to England Paddington to dive into this a little bit more, just because I think actually Chimera is probably the most interesting army at the WTC because of the strength of the trike, because of the poor performance of the faction overall, and because of the individual outstanding performances of Jamie Perkins, 5-0 on the winning team, and then Jake Van Meter, 5-0 on the second place team. And so you have a significant skew in the data where the faction was 40 and 50 overall. You take those two guys out and they were 30 and 50. And then obviously, Joe, you've done your deep dive on the trike and how powerful the trike is. So it's a lot of very interesting data. They feel overpowered and underpowered at the same time. And maybe the answer there lies in the strategy that was utilized by the teams, which Alex can explore when he interviews Team Paddington.
Yeah, that's part of it. The other bit I'll note as a Shadowflame Shard player for a while myself, still love the faction. They are such a hard faction to play because you need so much to go right in a game, and you can dictate a ton. But if a dice roll fails at one point, if you've mispositioned slightly, what goes from a winning position becomes a losing position almost immediately. They're a very punishing army. And as you go through a weekend, you're tired, you got a lot of high adrenaline. Maybe your team hasn't performed as well as you thought it had or thought it was going to. Those human factors can come in and exacerbate the position of the army.
And also what we just talked about. I mean, even if you do play perfectly, variance will get you. And there are some armies like Shadowflame that are just more vulnerable to variance swinging against you, just clustering at the wrong moment, like you said, Joe.
Yep. One of the other things that I think dictated how well you performed or not was if you brought stalkers. Wind stalkers were key to Perkins lists, and having gotten the list back on the table recently, the stalkers just enable you to set up trades and protect the army and protect the trike in a way that if you don't have them, you just can't. And I think those small little tech choices have a real significant impact on your win rate and the matchups that you can play into.
That's interesting because that's a unit that in the past I would have said does not rate very highly. But part of it is like they die super easy once they're in a position to be attacked. And in past iterations, there wasn't necessarily much that they were defending that was like ultra premium value now. That didn't, essentially provide its own protection like the Wyvern. And now that's completely flipped. Like, oh yeah, these guys have a purpose. Another adaptation, just before we go into like what went on at the weekend, was adapting to playing scenarios quite slowly and quite conservatively. If you were watching the stream games, you saw a lot of these games go quite long, and like longer than you would otherwise expect tournament games to go. Now, at least 2 of the scenarios played, and also potentially best laid plans, depending on what disappeared, were quite slow scenarios. And I think you've seen over this time period an adaptation where the armies are built with not quite defense in depth, but like they have enough units and enough activating modules that they can guarantee they can interact with those scenario elements, for 7 turns if they have to, and not be closed out, which was really common last year, by the way. Is that people would just lose their ability to interact with elements over time.
Do you think part of that is we talked about Kythos, right? And Kythos has a +3 defense feat, right? That is a blowout turn. And so your army needs to be built A, with a map modifier, but also B, you need to be able to sustain longer games.
Yes.
Same thing with Zadaroth or even Vargas, right? Vargas is a very popular caster, +3 armor feat. Sea Raiders seem to be designed around one specific warcaster, and he has a +3 armor feat. And so you do have a lot of the meta tied up in these strong feats that try to buy a turn. So designing a list that can throw some units forward, contest objectives, and take out a longer game is going to really benefit you. Now, Joe, I'm not that smart on Shadowflame, but I would guess that Shadowflame is probably punished in a longer game because they don't have as many pieces to offer to scenarios. So I wonder if grindier matchups is part of what led to Shadowflame's just lower win rate.
I would agree with that. Shadowflame does not want to sit there and grind. We will sit there and stare at you for turns. And then if you give us an opening, we will absolutely gut you. But if you force us to slow bleed on scenario, it is the least fun game that Shadowflame can play. And what will have to happen is the Shadowflame player will have to make a decision at some point and go, if I continue to bleed, I'm going to die. So I have to force you to engage, or I have to try and make something happen. And in those scenarios, you either win or you die.
Yeah.
And it's very easy for those to go south.
Alex, to go counter to that, Trolls had a very poor performance. Sorry. But aren't Trolls one of the best grindy factions? Like, shouldn't you love long scenario games?
I have thoughts on this.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to jump down the rabbit hole.
Oh no. I'll try and keep this brief. I mean, I'll try and keep this brief because I think I've said this in the past. I will 100% accuse the broader Brine Bloods player base of choosing to play their faction wrong. The faction has two real big problems. And there's so much where I feel like who's the guy who wound. I feel like a biblical prophet in that I have very specific things to say, and they're the things that nobody wants to hear about this faction. One of which is, and Brine Bloods is often the victim of metagame crossfire because of their defensive abilities, their defensive profiles, And the fact that they tend to lean on healing mechanics more than most as a means of self-preservation. I'll say the Brine Bloods player on the winning team was the only player at the event running Surgeons. Your army's Def 12, which is awful. That's uncurably bad. And your models are Arm 13. That's even worse. Essentially this faction cannot defend itself. It's very hard to stack things up to make those numbers square. But I see a lot of people committing more than they probably should to making those numbers work. And the fact of the matter is those numbers are so bad. The Surgeons are actually your best defensive measure. Recursion, even if it's limited, is your best defensive measure that you have on offer. Another one, Boomhowler, who had an abysmal rate, and the list construction here was like so few Boomhowler lists included a king. Like, what are you doing? It's the one piece in the army that's genuinely tough. Boomhowler lists were not built well. Boomhowler suffered. The faction is just an offense faction because it is exposed to so much metagame crossfire, and because its defenses are so weak. Everything you do has to be about offense. And the faction actually plays incredibly well into the metagame and is remarkably metagame resilient for how much its defenses get caught, because it doesn't matter if you're going hard to kill in either direction. Brine Bloods has your number. Like, we're going to materialize Matt 10 to 12 and POW 17 on Warriors before the battle group even gets involved. Mr. Gumby Moto. The best way to think of current Brine Bloods is imagine a Mark II, Mark III Scorn battle group backed up by Talion Charter Warriors. That's essentially what the faction is. They're just in troll colors. But yeah, the faction's all about its offense, and it can actually be really good into the metagame. Boomhowler and Shadow Tongue are just the best casters in the faction. Almost everybody else lives in their shadow. Bragan Ragemonger is a niche pick. He's good for fishing out a couple of matchups in ways that are slightly better than Boomhowler and Shadow Tongue, but he's not great and he's not a generalist. He was the main drop at the WTC, 50-50 win rate, best in the faction. And what do you expect when you're playing your niche guy up front nonstop? There's a lot that could be said about Bragan. He's metagame viable. He's the only one that successfully differentiates himself from being anything other than a worse version of Boomhowler or Shadow Tongue. But this is harsh, but Brine Blood players just do not have their heads screwed on right. So that's my rant. I'll actually segue that into why the defenses matter, and returning to that slow scenario point. Brine Bloods wants to counterpunch you or just punch you and then keep punching you, and no matter, it's very old school Scorn. Like, no matter how much of their army you kill, what's remaining can probably punch up disproportionately.
Yep.
But the length of the scenarios and how much, in 2024, scenario play was really dictated by flank collapse and removing the ability to score or contest meaningfully. I think over a longer epicycle than any particular metagame, we've gotten to an environment right now where, just by the nature of the packet, defenses are top of the stack. Defensive feats, armies of a defensive orientation, et cetera, just because it is a means of enhancing the ability to play that long game. Thoughts on that?
No, definitely agree. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say that the game is built to go the distance, and better players that you tend to be at the WTC, more invested players, are going to be lunch pail players, meaning they're there for the entire 2 hours of the game. They don't mind going all the way to the end of the game. In fact, that's what they live for. And they want to be very practiced at those final 2 minutes as your clock is against you and everything else. And most of the games that you saw on stream went the distance. And again, that's a testament to the level of play at the event. But it is also part of the packet. This packet is very slow. There's a couple that are a little faster. But there's no scenario here where you're going to blow somebody out at top of 3.
Mm-hmm.
You might because of a skill differential, but again, when you remove that skill differential, you're going to be playing a game all day.
Yeah, and Alex, I mean, I get your point. If the players missed the meta a little bit, this is a game where certainly leaders create lists and then a lot of people jump in and follow. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just it's any sort of meta, right? Any competitive game, somebody wins an event with a deck, a list, it gets copied. And if Brine Bloods were just at the wrong place at the wrong time, like you said, Alex, I mean, there's a right way to play the faction and there's the way it got played, right? Yeah. And if you are a grindy faction and you played into a grindy meta, you would have thought that they would have overperformed. But if you pick the wrong list for the wrong reasons, then you get stuck in a bad spot. Dusk, I think Dusk is incredible. I'm a Dusk player. Dusk had a 40% win rate. They were atrocious.
Yeah, Dusk took the wrong horses to the event.
I don't get it. Like I have a list pair that I think smashes. I lose when I make mistakes.
Yep. I gotta take care of the dog for a minute, but Joe, I've heard you advance, and I'm gonna be following along. Yep. I've heard you advance the thesis that like for 2 years in a row, Moraine was a bad pick.
Moraine is horrific.
Go into the Dusk team environment, and it are the undead elves in the same spot that Brine Bloods are, where it's not necessarily a faction failing, but an estimation and valuation failing on the part of the players.
Yeah, I would say it's an estimation and valuation issue on the part of the players. Moraine was not good last year at the WTC. She had a sub 50% win rate. She was worse this year. And again, if you look at the meta as a whole, this meta is very aggressive towards spellcasters. It is very aggressive towards everything that Moraine wants to do. So the fact that she was taken at the rate she was taken and then dropped at the rate she was dropped into, I'm not surprised that it drained the faction of its win rate. I think we have seen a hidden gem rise up and be uncovered in some of the Hazaroth lists that were played.
Definitely.
Both of the Hazaroth players played extremely well into a variety of lists and exposed a weakness in the meta, which is this meta did not, despite the fact the trike is there, this meta did not bring enough entropy or entropy and grievous wounds.
Yeah. And the other problem they have is I think that we even saw Hazaroth with a Phantasm a couple of times in there.
Yep.
And the best part about that is that the Phantasm single-handedly doesn't benefit from several of the good things that Hazaroth brings to the table, and yet it was a huge pick and a major factor in his win rates. What do you think about that one?
Well, I think when you can make a colossal speed 8, it really doesn't matter what else you're doing.
You can also, I think with Hazaroth, it depends how you're playing it, but if you had a unit of cats that you stacked in front of a Phantasm that was vulnerable, and then you kept the cats alive, just with his abilities, you can block charge lanes, right?
Yes.
And that's a major factor. Even though you can't heal it, if you can keep a heavy without a landing spot, or even call it a trike on the other side, right? Because it needs a bigger landing zone. Granted, it's got 3-inch reach, but I to go back to the Moraine thing, I'm a Tyrants player myself. I think he's phenomenal. I think he got played 4 times.
Yes.
Moraine all year has been the top drop in Dusk. And Moraine all year has had a poor win rate. And I don't understand why the meta from Dusk players has not evolved. Helith obviously has been around, but dramatically shifted with the Phantasm. So your primary list or your secondary list is now Helith with a Phantasm. I get it. But why is the other list Moraine? And when are people going to kind of figure it out? I do think the Hazaroth developments were interesting. I didn't deep dive into the data like you guys did as far as, how much anti-healing was present. But Hazaroth is a great caster in a team environment because if you can dodge the heavy anti-healing army, then he might be able to just play around in the swimming pool and he gets a free win. And so Hazaroth is the sort of list you want to bring Helith 1, Hazaroth 2, try to put your Dusk player into the Hazaroth advantage matchup where it's a free win. And if not, you just fall back on Helith, who can be a very well-rounded piece. Instead, you end up with all these Moraine games. Or Tyrants could play a very long, drawn-out, slugfest sort of recursion game, and that plays better into this grindy meta with longer scenarios rather than having Moraine there. So it was I don't know, a shame.
Yeah, I'm still surprised at the rate of Dusk selection, though. That was a complete oddball to me that there were that much Dusk at the event.
That is the other thing, is there were 16 Dusk players, right? You mentioned before, 18 Shadow Flames, and then 17 Gravediggers, 16 Signar,
16 Gravediggers, 16 Storm Legion, 16 Dusk, and
So for Dusk players to choose to show up in those numbers, right? You're on competitive teams. You were picked for these events. You're showing up to win and compete. And 16 players said, yeah, I want to bring Dusk and I want to play them. No offense to Alex's side of things with the Blood Brine, but at least they weren't taken 16 times, right? Like if they thought that they weren't at the peak of the meta, leave that faction at home. The fact that 16 players elected to bring Dusk and then elected to drop Moraine at the rate that they did, it really surprises me. I think Dusk falls in the same spot as Trolls, as I think they were doing it wrong at the time.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the presence of Moraine almost suggests to me that there was, I don't know. I'd have to ask some of the players and captains what sort of consideration went into it. See, the only thing I can think with like Moraine is like, well, how do we cope with this defense heavy meta? The obvious answer is Helith, but she also didn't, show spectacularly. But I almost feel like Moraine was my intuition is that Moraine was an attempt to deal with Trichimerax plus defense showing up as strong players in the army, and it's just not sufficient. My like watching games with Moraine, and like Moraine on paper dunks Brine Bloods. I don't think I've lost to her this year. There's unlike in the era with Big Pig, there's just not enough that she can really leverage to tee off on what she does. And if you're trying to respond to a Trichimerax, it's like, sure, you do have the ability to just raw push through its healing and its arcane vortex, but you're following it up with not much, so that's just troublesome.
I think you hit on the nature of it, Alex, and this is what I thought too, is when something looks good on paper, it's hard to say no. She's a caster who does a whole lot, and on paper, she's just scary and good in everything. But when you start realizing how narrow her focus has to be on a turn-by-turn basis, like you said, on paper, she should dunk on brines, but she dunks on like a unit or two of brines. And then what do you do? And the problem is if you don't have a follow-up plan for that, well, an aggro army like brines swarms all over you, lose 3/4 of your stuff, and now what do you do? That's kind of what happens.
Now,
and I think you're going to find that with her too at the WTC.
Now there was one huge bright spot for Dusk. Dusk was the only faction that absolutely dunked on Old Umbry. They had a 63% win rate on Old Umbry.
We should go into Old Umbry since they're the new kid on the block and a little bit of a surprise. Full inclusion for the WTC. Lord of the Hunt excluded. Sorry, buddy.
Did you happen to pay attention to what was it? Moraine, I guess, that was dropped into Old Umbry that did that well.
So it was basically all of the casters. Dusk has a lot of anti-armor tools. The Old Umbry lists that were at the event were anti-armor list, or were armor stack lists.
No, yeah. The faction with its spell rack can just reorient itself like, oh, you brought a bear bunker. Cute. Cats don't care. They will just.
I don't care. Curse of Shadows battle list. We're done.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
The one thing they don't do is hit fixing, and they get somewhat miffed at Old Umbry's defense 13, but that's about it.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, that is an interesting bright spot. So let's pivot actually into discussing. I had a hypothesis that I think goes a long way toward explaining the success of the two teams at the top tables, particularly Paddington that won.
Yep.
My hypothesis for what explains a lot of the very curious results we've seen out of this WTC, because this was a very curious WTC, is the counter metagame hypothesis. Essentially, we had this long proving out period over the summer where, as you guys say, like Kythos ratings started out really high and kept going down until they were approaching 50-50 the week before the event. And everybody, the teams that did really, really well, I think with the exception of among the top four, USA Condor, which was essentially just running the meta straight up and down, piloted by genuinely exceptional players. A big contributing factor that you can see on the three other teams in the top four is they had strong elements that were running against the grain of that summer developed meta. So this can be things like Aslanov and Bears released just in time for list lock after list lock is moved to allow them in, and that faction skews significantly more armor heavy on easily its strongest caster, who is also running something that the metagame is not broadly teched against, and hasn't gone through any attenuation period to deal with. The other element of what cuts against the grain, and like this is Poland every year, and I think a lot of what gives that country its edge in competitive War Machine, it's almost like the Poles are peering into the future and pulling some metagame that will exist in maybe 2 years. But I'd also say this was broadly present on Paddington, and then specifically Gilvanash and Perkins were running very, very not orthodox lists. I mean, like Jamie Perkins, his Kirax list was essentially the default Kirax list from last year. And it turned out it forsook the support of the Paragon and just said, let's go for offense, which Kirax can do because his threat ranges are so freaking long that it's like, what does it matter if you shave range? I'm still getting on you. But he was essentially running last year's Kirax, and it was really good into the field. His Shiris list also had a Wyvern, which has really fallen out of favor with the trike, just because you're so tight on points. And he really like scrimped and saved every drop to make sure that his army still had tons of activating modules. You know, the other one, a lot of Infernals players had started to step away from Omademos because he does have trouble with scenarios. I did a look at Gilles' game record, but he was essentially like, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but he was essentially dropping Omo into slow scenarios, which is actually a place where he really thrives.
Yes.
And his Zadaroth list essentially forsakes the standard big battle group warpath. Well, not entirely forsakes, but it moves. It doesn't even really lean into the defense feat because he's running a Colossal plus he's running Nostilla and Aberration. It's a very, very, very different army and in a quite different Infernals pair. And both those guys went 5-0. Gilles is on his third year of going undefeated.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah. Gilles is a phenomenal player. And what I love about the Colossal and the Zadaroth list is it gave him a dominant position into Gravediggers, which was otherwise a potential issue for Infernals. Gravediggers had a very good result outside of Zill into Infernals at the WTC this year, with Infernals posting a 51% win rate after being sort of the meta darling for most of the year.
Didn't Gilles against Condor, I think it was, just manhandled Gravediggers, I believe.
Oh yeah.
That was
his game into Brandon Owens is just tears. Forcing Brandon into a corner was the name of the game, and that Colossal just stood there.
Yep.
Contested and choked Brandon's position to death.
Yep. That was a hard game for me to watch, by the way, because I'm very close friends with both those guys, and I'm like really hoping like USA win and like, oh, this is tearing me up inside.
So just help me real quick. Vargas doesn't deal with the armor as well, and so when you bring that many boxes on a Colossal, Vargas just doesn't have the way right, because Vargas heavies are POW 17, POW 19 on the charge.
Yep,
and
he can stack Silence of Death on top of that, but that's as good as it gets.
Yeah, he has a very finite ceiling to how good he is into armor.
Yeah, he caps out, so the inclination is to have to drop Jake's to get the synergy up, and
having the Harvester makes that scary because Jake's has to be scared the whole game.
Yes, absolutely.
Like terrified. I had thought about actually a year ago when Necrofactorium was first hitting the street, I had thought along the lines of a Harvester with Zadaroth just to answer the recursion engine I saw coming. And I've played the Harvester with her several times. I was rocking it at Boker Brawl in 2024. I didn't do it this year, but I'll tell you, I love that thing with her. It is so freaking good. The Nostilla Aberration definitely trends a little bit more defensive than I might have gone with Zadaroth. But that's a cool splash, too. Ain't nothing wrong with a big nerd that Zadaroth can ignore outside of Dark Legacy. Just put on a flank and say, you hold this now. I dare my opponent to come get it from me.
Well, it's also an army with two operating modules whose primary value is standing in places. And it turns out that's kind of oppressive when you want the game to go long.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's my favorite kind of game. I love models that just exist convincingly. That's like my favorite kind of model in the game. What does it do? It sits there. Anything else? Like the Inditer. The Inditer and Redeemer combo was my favorite combination in Protectorate. What does the Inditer do? Nothing. Pisses you off for 7 turns. I love it. It's so great. What's the Redeemer do? Also pisses you off for 7 turns. Neat.
No, Chris. They win games. That's what they do.
Well,
you win games by standing on places nowadays.
And
it turns out if you can stand there forever.
It turns out standing somewhere takes 0 clock, but forces your opponent to spend a lot of it.
Yes, and that was the decisive factor. I mean, but it's so remarkable, like how much this list forsakes, like, defense skew, whatever. I'm mostly just going to make plays based on like game state fundamentals and force reaction.
I'm also going to say this is going to sound like, even though we just got done with the hate parade on defense 12, a defense 12 colossal is a little different than defense 12 the infantry.
Mm-hmm.
It might not seem like much. It's like, it's still kind of bare bones cruddy, but you miss 1 or 2 attacks, and all of a sudden this thing is living far longer than you want it to, and suddenly another heavy needs to come in to finish the job. And oh my god, I'm now clustered up, and this is going to be really bad.
I think Sirafel is probably slightly underexplored since the release of the Phantasm, because that thing takes Gravewind like a champ. And you do not want a heavy to come into that.
Everything 16 to range. Yeah, that's and then no spells, right?
And no spells. And oh, by the way, if your heavy misses a 6 to hit, it's done.
Yep.
And she can just be like, oh yeah, also you'll get push D3 every time you approach this, so your heavies may just never start.
Yeah.
I mean, is that going to be good? I don't know, but is it underexplored? Yeah.
It's not Moraine. It doesn't work.
Oh man.
Empirical evidence.
But yeah. So I think that's just more broadly, I think that was a big contributor to the top 4 is counter metagame. And it exists on 2 layers. One is composition, one is calls. Let's see, what do we have here? Sorry if this was talked about yet, but was the reported win rate of Dark Operations a statistical fluke / anomaly due to the sample size, or is that army really that solid? Joe, you talked about this a bit over the weekend.
Yes. Dark Ops was undertaken. Dark Ops should have been one of the top factions played from quote unquote legacy. Even though they're honorary Mark IV now.
Yeah. Well, what's remarkable is like Kythos had a really underwhelming win rate in Crix, and he was only dropped 4 times in Dark Operations, but won all of those.
Yeah, he won all of those, and then Thexus was dropped a ton, and Thexus won nearly all of her
absolutely
games.
Commanding. Yeah.
And then Siphon also
pulled
fantastic.
a 70-something% win rate.
Yeah,
it was disgustingly high.
It was a phenomenal win rate, and it should have been played more. It benefited so much from the new units and the new relook that it got, as well as just availability of models. And in the scenario packet in which we find ourselves, being able just to drop a box skew with really solid infantry turns out is pretty good when the meta is geared up to just hit hit anything with high defense. And you're sitting there, I'm defense 12. I don't care. Get through my boxes.
Yeah.
Like I'm defense 10, armor 17. Those stats are terrible. Yes. Can you kill 300 of them? Wait a second.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. Like Dark Operations on the table, I looked at it, I'm like, this isn't a War Machine army. This is a football team. This is like 8 linebackers coming at me, and you have dudes. Like you have 4 units and then 8 solos. And wait a second, what the hell?
Bodies on body. It's like everything Trolls wishes it was.
It is an interesting list to look forward in the meta on. Alex, you kind of mentioned this earlier. What is the WTC going to tell us for the rest of the year? Except we're going to hit January pretty quickly.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Dark Operations coming into this event was high 40s win rate, maybe 48%. And so to see them overperform at this level, it did surprise me. But as you guys were saying, clearly they have the tools. And when Dark Operations are in the hands of a player that's well practiced and knows what they're doing, it is a very strong army. I am curious if Dark Operations in the more global meta will maybe suffer a little bit in its win rate just because it is the most available faction of any, right? Because you can print it.
Certain.
And so anybody can pick up Dark Ops and play them. And so they're going to suffer from the, ease of access. And so everybody can play them. And so maybe the overall win rate is a little bit less, but don't underestimate them, I guess, is what the WTC would tell us, is because in the hands of the populace, yeah, people are going to make mistakes. In the hands of a qualified WTC player, they're terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, Gravediggers has had that problem since day one. Like Trenchers turned a lot of people onto this game. It was the most fun and exciting thing. I love my Tucson guys. The Tucson meta is wonderful. It is a lot of newer players, and a lot of those newer players bought Gravediggers. And the last time I was down there at a tournament, they were not anywhere close to figuring out functional Gravedigger army building.
It's tough. It is tough.
It's a hard army to build, and it's a hard army to play. There's so much nuance to what they want to do. And Brandon has a great line about this, Brandon Owens.
Mm-hmm.
Brandon Owens said, Gravediggers is basically, I'll paraphrase, Gravediggers is an incredible army if you understand the game and you can see the lines. And if you can do that, they're nearly unbeatable. If you can't do that, you will get your ass kicked with Gravediggers.
Mm-hmm.
Very fast.
Right.
Dark Operations is going to be a bit more forgiving than that for people, just by the nature of the fact that there are fewer options that you can take. You only have 3 cohorts. They're not modular. You only have so many units. You only have so many solos. So creating a list isn't going to be that hard, and you will be buoyed by the fact that the hill that I continue to die on is that Exelon Thexus is the best leader in the game. Not backing off of that one. You put him in any other faction.
Shadow Tongue is the other contender with him.
Yeah, contender, yeah, but Thexus takes the crown because he is BS. You put him in any army that's not Dark Operations, and he runs away with it. So yeah, he is horse crap. I love him. He's delicious, but oh god, he's terrible.
Well, I think it's interesting that I fall more closely to Ryan's estimation here, in that, the populace function of Dark Operations may be a little bit muddled, because this faction does, even though it got a rework, still broadly comes from the old school of design. Injection of new units, of Mark IV style units, is a big help. But this is mostly an army that wants to fight you in a traditional Mark II, Mark III way, which can function. Like, if your tools are good enough and up to scratch, which Dark Operations are, but it does want to fight you traditionally. That can be hard to do without understanding fundamentals of positioning, of peace trading, and of the momentum of the game and scenario, and controlling that momentum. These are not newbies skills. These are advanced player skills. And, I think the faction can sing once you have the, gory, unromantic, like, Tactica down hard. But that's not going to be every gamer's experience.
I would say right now that there may be no army in War Machine that better exemplifies a good fundamental play and how far it can carry you. That there are definitely, we got stats armies, we've got a lot of different tricky ones. Obviously, fundamentals are always good, but you're right, Alex, in that Dark Operations doesn't have, I would say, a ton more going on under the hood, because it still has an older design mentality behind it. But the good thing is, it is pure raw efficiency. So mastering the fundamentals is really going to take you far, because it almost has an outsized effect in that army.
Oh yeah, this is why I spent a whole year playing Steelheads, like double pairing Steelheads armies. It's like, well, the faction doesn't have a lot of fancy rules, but I know my fundamentals. Also, I start the game with a 2-1 or 3-1 numbers advantage, so I think I can make that work.
Yeah, it's 2-1, 3-1. Wait, those are all cohort models. I am screwed, aren't I? Yes. I had that moment in Nova against Chiraboga and Siphon. It's the first time I'd seen modern Siphon dropped, and I looked at him like, he has 8 cohort models, and I think that is 2/3 of his points. Oh god. I'm like, I have no answer to this. It was incredible. It was a beautiful experience going, I am screwed. Like, there's nothing in my pairing that answers this in any way. Help me.
That's that new metagame. Speaking of new metagame, and I mean, I do want to qualify this because Ryan, you mentioned it. Like, come January, this metagame may not exist, but it's interesting to watch the transition happen. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, because Dark Ops kind of gets us there with 8 heavies and high arm with Siphon in particular. This metagame got rug pulled by Aslanov and Armor.
Yes. The if you look at the list and you look at the list design of the majority of WTC players, they skewed very heavily to be able to take on defense and skewed towards range. The problem with that is that if you bring a brick with a high armor cap, you get to sit there, the POW 12s bounce off of you, and then you charge them and they die. And that was how a lot of games went for Aslanov and his armor brick, because up until a few months ago in the meta, prior to May, Harusk and his high armor stack were running around and causing a whole bunch of issues for folks. And then everybody started bringing anti-armor tools, and Harusk got very sad. And then Kythos sort of rose up, and we had the defense meta skew. And as the defense meta skew occurred, people forgot about armor skew. And with the under the wire move to allow bears in, people were not ready for the armor skew. It showed, and they were able to take advantage. And folks like Vargas and Harusk also benefited from the lack of armor tools in people's lists. So I don't think it's while I think Old Umbry is very strong. Yes, for full disclosure, yes, I'm playing Old Umbry. I think Old Umbry is very strong, but I do think it's more an issue of quality reps into Old Umbry with the armor skews, and it's people not bringing the tools to deal with an armor skew, because an armor skew really wasn't on the horizon outside of Harusk and Vargas.
Mm-hmm. And those are a very specific type of armor skew that do not threat a ton of distance. Where Aslanov differs a little bit is that threat ranges are baked into Old Umbry. 13-inch melee threat range is just part of the army's DNA. That's how it's supposed to work. I don't know that I can count to 13 in Sea Raiders, and Vargas does that with his gun, and that's about it.
Yep.
So it's
also a matter of
it's a brick that actually will charge you after it's done standing there.
Yeah, and you guys mentioned the bears being kind of let in under the wire, and so people were able to throw together lists and test them on the. People had been able to test lists on the Old Umbry side, but testing your counter list and then knowing how much of it was actually going to show up, right? That puts a lot of players in a difficult position. As you guys are saying, armor cracking was underrepresented. Mm-hmm. And that's a tough spot to put the player base. I don't disagree with letting Old Umbry and the bears in. I mean, it was timing. It was what it was. But people didn't have a chance to really... you could test against it after the lists were released, but if you didn't have the tools in your list to start with, you're just kind of stuck. On top of Old Umbry obviously being a very powerful army, just in general, deep synergy, strong stats, Maxim himself. I mean, he'll just murder you, and plus the armor, the resiliency. They're great.
Yep. It was interesting talking to Mike Sterling last week. Because the Old Umbry lists that we got were actually kind of, because list lock was a while ago, they tended to be slightly older model in that a lot of Old Umbry armies are, or were strongly over supported. And the vision that Sterling offered of the future of Old Umbry is like, we're cutting down to like 17 points of support, bleeding maximum. And then we're going to be like business, many activating modules. We're going to take like careful conservatorship of our battle group rather than being like a send them in type faction. it seems like the advantage is intensifying. And what Old Umbre is a strong faction. I feel like, kind of like we were talking about with the populist, the populist effect. Old Umbre has a remarkably low skill floor to get into and be effective with. But well, here's the thing. I came out of the discussion with Sterling thinking, okay, on the whole, the faction is balanced with the exception of Maxim. Like, there's not a single thing where I would say its points cost is wrong for what it does. Maxim seems out, like, I was just like, this caster's like, in the hands of a proficient player, like, this caster's very, very strong and probably needs to be toned down. His win percentage was bananas.
Yeah, and that's repeatable. Like, he's been doing that. It's not, we've talked about differences in the regular meta versus the WTC meta. We've had overperformers and underperformers.
He does the same thing everywhere.
I say Old Umbre came in at 60%, and that's where they've been. And then Maxim was above 60, and that's where he's been. And it just kind of is what it is right now. We don't need to make this an Old Umbre debate. I think they need a very soft touch. I think the Starved needs to lose the -2 damage aura, and that would bring them a long ways to coming in line. Any small edits past that, I'm really willing to look past. That's one that gets me. That's where that armor stacking just gets way, way too high, especially with Maxim.
It also makes it caster agnostic. With the Starved, is you can take the bear module and Starved anywhere, and you've got arm 24 bears. Maxim just gives you arm 26 bears all over the place.
Feels good.
That are fast. Yeah, I did an episode,
and then you have gang on the beast to back it up.
How 20 Starved with no investment.
You're just throwing stats at people at that point, right?
Yeah.
I did an episode a few weeks back trying to talk about, like, how do people engage in the game? And there's a handful of different ways to engage. You have guns, you're really fast, you can be tanky and just brick up. And he just does, and then there's control feats. Those are kind of my summaries. And he does 3 of those things. He can be very fast, he can be very tanky, and then he's got a darn control feat. And he's like impossible to kill under his control feat. And so he gets way up the table,
and he can also jump at your caster and just kill them if you were fool enough to leave them within
13-inch threat. So if Maxim goes first, he's going to run feet, and he's going to be past the midline with a 13-inch threat to your caster. So you're basically like, you're killboxing yourself. Otherwise you get eaten by Maxim if they go first. And that's, to where I said that I would like to see the Starve taken out because I think it pushes the armor skew over. Maxim is also a tough model just because of his own threat. And especially, again, if they go first, right? Being able to run feet and then threat 13 more inches, it's a lot. It's hard.
Well, he's also in the Moraine Club where he can pull an enemy Colossal with not burning his entire stack and still be in a pretty safe place afterwards. Like that level of like, oh, you send a heavy into the Old Umbre army. Well, it's possible that the Ursine champion just pops Tactician and Maxim kills it and is still 17-19 at no other cost to the rest of your army. Like, ooh, that doesn't feel good.
No, his stats get so high.
He kind of breaks one of my, like, if we're looking at a trifecta of pain, he kind of breaks one thing for me in that he is very durable and he does have really great threat ranges and everything hits really hard when it lands. That's the part that really breaks me, is that for not too much investment, everything is trucking you. That one of these things does have to go, because that's what leads to a very oppressive, I literally can't do anything except just exist at the whim of going first to have a shot against you. And even then, it's not a great shot. It's just the shot I have.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. I think because the gang plus with the battle plans, right? Being able to give him armor, being able to give gang is what turns up both defense and offense. And it feels like he needs to be more of a backline caster, right? Where he needs to lose that 5-inch leap and just kind of hang out, give him some advantages, give him some windows to go do work. But he's already supporting the army so well through those two abilities that also threatening to go, like Alex said, oh, my Warcaster's just going to go kill a Colossal now. Sorry. That's a lot.
I mean, losing the leap, I haven't heard anyone suggest that so far, but it is interesting because it solves, him hitting on a fourth vector, which is the offense vector. And like, okay, you can actually leave his obnoxious damage potential untouched as long as he's only doing it for like very limited counter punching. He can't reach out with it.
Yeah,
it's 11 inches and it's linear
for years. It's great.
Yep, he's counter punching. If you went that route, what would the feeling be if you dropped the stand your ground battle plan, which is the throwaway battle plan, and put that in as, giving him jump, where you don't get armor, but he gets to jump?
That's the turn he's killing you, though. He doesn't need it. He doesn't need the armor anymore.
That solves the problem, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just asking.
Although I wish they would stop printing set defense on casters with battle plans. Like, what are we doing here?
Nobody is using this. Ew.
And again, this is not a toot my horn moment, but like if Brine Bloods players were dialed in properly and like building like red deck wins rather than, trying to have defensive games. I haven't lost to Maxim either this year. Brine Blood's hyper offense just punches through his brick and kind of doesn't notice. And they kind of don't notice, one, because they have the hitting power to get it done, and two, because they still outnumber it. So like they can punch through and then take hits and then punch the rest of the way, and then Old Umbree's out of stuff. But you have to just be building the faction for pure offense. If you have one thought for keeping yourself alive, it's not going to work. Anyways, so Maxim is obviously the elephant in the room. We've touched on Vargas and his role as the generalist, very much simpatico with the meta. Emerald Dragon, I see you there. We're gonna get to it. Let's talk about Orgoth, the other surprise of the weekend. So we had Horus doing really well, and then Butcher being arguably criminally underplayed, but he seemed like, just based on his representation and where and how he won, an unbelievable counter metagame pick. And I mean, I'll be honest, like I did a lot of games against Blake over the course of this year, and I was surprised to see him move off of Butcher right before the event.
Same.
I think Blake and I had like 4 games in a month or something like that. And his pair terrified the pants off of me when it had Butcher in it.
Yeah, Butcher had his coming out party at this WTC. He plays an incredibly great game into Crix and any other infantry heavy faction because he's just built to munch that. Additionally, he has game into the trike because his feat turns off the healing. And he can just trivially remove one with how well that list hits. He gives the threat extension that is so missing currently in Sea Raiders. The list does a lot of things incredibly well, and he played phenomenally throughout the event when he was dropped. Horus was a 53% win clip, and Butcher was 70-some percent. Butcher performed incredible.
He was like
should have
6-1 or 7-1 or something, right?
Yeah, 7-1. Yeah. He should have been the default pair with Horusk.
Yeah.
He just wasn't. A couple folks came off of him. Blake was the surprise there because Blake was on him early.
Yeah, he'd been playing him for a while.
Well, and it's doubly like, okay, we all know like the it's been Harusk is the faction, and like he's spell warded, he's rack 1, but it's like, in order to be the canonical pair, you just have to be better than Sabreth, Kishtar, and Oriax, and it turns out that's like the lowest bar in existence.
Should be labeled a trip hazard. Yeah.
Oh man,
it's not
Can
great.
you guys walk me through? I'm a Sea Raiders newbie, so
Sure.
Butcher has lots of Berserk, and then his he grants homicidal to his battle group, right? So everybody gets to move an inch after they kill something,
which is just worse overtake, because you need to have
Yes.
nothing in your melee range before you get to move. So it's not nearly as good as overtake is. His big shtick, the game plan, is that you're playing Butcher to leverage the fact that he is Butcher. He's a POW 16 with crit decap. He is Cav. That is nice. Sometimes it comes in handy. Sometimes it doesn't. But the thing is, you want him to go in, start getting Blood Quench tokens, homicidal maniacing around the board, and he starts getting to a point, if he can kill enough things, that he becomes impossible to kill himself and can move from leveling lighter infantry to heavier infantry to heavies. So
he needs to hit
his
about
game plan, and he is supporting his army through a dual application of Hunter's Mark, which is the big draw. Orgoth has one other non-battle group threat extension in the entire army, and that's poor sad Oriax's once per unit per turn teleport a model that's within 5 inches of him, 2 inches. Not nearly as good. And then the other thing is that he does have Hand of Destruction. There is some argument to use it. You can build for it, some cool tech around it. Not necessarily what I'm thinking of, but
it's a 10%er spell, but it's choice every now and again.
Yeah.
And then
so he does work, and he's there to do work.
Yeah. He's playing for about turn 3 or 4 when he gets to charge, and against most armies, he only needs to get 5 or 6 Blood Quench tokens and that puts him at a point where he's functionally invincible.
Yeah.
If he really gets to tee off, like I played against a local who was running Butcher, and I ran Storm Legion into him. On one turn, Butcher killed 12 of my models, one of which was the general, who I specifically feet moved like in a way to stop him from killing spreeing further. And in the next turn, he killed 12 more models, one of which was Deuce.
Yeah.
This caster lives for charging in the mid game, killing. He doesn't even have to kill that much. That was just a game where he got to tee off. He lives for killing 5 to 6 guys, maybe 7, and just being, you can't kill me. Also, I'm 8 inches further up the board. What are you going to do about it? And then next turn, I killed 8 models, and I'm 9 more inches further up the board. What are you going to do about it? You're running out of table here fast, bucko. And then just running your opponent out of table or models.
Do you think he also benefited from the pairings format? Do you think, so as Sea Raiders players look at the WTC and they're trying to plan for the rest of the year, again, not very much of a rest of the year, but is this Butcher's coming out party, this needs to be in your list pair now, or should people take a little bit off of that because list pairings put Butcher, look, there was lots of Cricks, right? There were a ton of Cricks players, and if Cricks got lined up against Sea Raiders often and Butcher gets dropped and he munches the list, that's a good day for Sea Raiders, a bad day for Cricks. It's why we see the numbers for Sea Raiders go up, Cricks goes down, and the team format allows you to force that more often.
I think part of it's that. The other part is, I think right now when you look at the landscape of Sea Raiders and the landscape of the game, Sabreth is being pinched by the same issues that are hitting Moraine. Just the amount of anti-spell in the game, the lack of easy threat extension, which used to be what Sabreth provided with the cohort, the expense of Sea Raider heavies comparative to the rest of the field now.
Tyrants are costly.
They are super costly, which is why you're seeing less and less of them on the field. Um, you have Oriax, who is a trash panda, and you have Kishtar, who has a lot of interesting tech, and the hardest thing for Kishtar is staying alive. She's allergic to life.
15-15. Yeah, she's underbaked. I really liked in the last update that they began to push her off of shoot harder, which is never a viable design niche, by the way. It either breaks the game like Kane 3 did for like 6 months in 2017, and then they changed the scenario packet so that Kane 3 was no longer scenario viable. But like during Kane 3's like those 6 months, the game was over. Kane 3 was the best caster. He was borderline unbeatable. Or like, you know, start a Mark 3, Sloan releases all screwed up. Like either like definitionally shoot harder casters are either the end of the game or subpar. There's no design middle ground. I love that they moved Kishtar off of that plan because she clearly wasn't ending the game, but like she was half baked. She's almost there, just her redesign is not far enough.
And playing a bunch of Kishtar this year, I agree with that. The big takeaway I had was that she is a caster that functionally doesn't do a whole lot and kind of needs to run for her life. If you want to compare her to an easy counterpart in Dusk as Helith, they functionally, mechanically, when you look at their stats, their weapons, you would think that they would operate similarly. But Helith shoots her guns all the time, and Kishtar may shoot it on occasion when she may not just fall over dead as a result.
Yeah, and Helith is mostly an army support caster who makes attacks every round, which is a great niche to be in.
Mm-hmm.
But her the extent of her shooting design is me and maybe these 2 other guys shoot slightly better, and we ignore some common things at no cost. And like that's it. That's as much as she does for guns. Other than that, she runs an army.
And Kishtar really is just kind of a feet button. And unfortunately, you know, coming from Protectorate, having a walking feet button isn't the most exciting thing for me because I play that for 2 editions. There's quite a few of those in Protectorate. But she's a feet and upkeep button, and she like lack of a field marshal, lack of any other army tech just keeps her kind of boring and keeps her relatively I wouldn't say narrow, just uninspiring in what she can go into. I actually like her quite a bit. It turns out Signs Importance is a pretty good feat, but you know, we kind of know it. It's nothing exciting. It's just effective.
Yeah. Okay, so that's sort of the Orgoth thing. And I mean, you know, Joe, would you say that this is, I mean, I think the team dynamic does play some part of it, but would you, I mean, I reckon this is probably a function of just, you know, I think, what was it? Almost a year of straight up underrating the Butcher on the part of the community, and now he's just begun to appreciate. Where do you land on that?
I think it's a lot of underappreciation by both Orgoth players and community. I'm guilty of it. The early results with Butcher were not what we wanted. He was not at all anything that brought to the faction. We were in a different meta at that point as well. Sabrith was still the clear shining star of the off list.
Mm-hmm.
As the game has evolved, as anti-spell has become more prominent, as cheaper heavies have been introduced in other armies, the shine kind of came off Sabrith's game. And Sabrith also got hit pretty hard in this packet.
Mm-hmm.
So with those factors, I think the need for exploration was definitely there in the faction, and you kind of looked around and went, well, we could play the guy that half of our spells don't work on, but if he gets there is going to kill the world, or we can play Kishtar, and she's got a very interesting feat, not much else going on, but a very interesting feat.
Yeah.
And then Oriax exists.
He sure do.
He sure is.
I don't know why you would, but you can.
One thing I will say about Sabrith, I mean, I think you're right about the metagame reactance to her and where she gets edged out. I've been surprised by this all year, honestly. Is I think melee perdition plays on Sabrith are dead.
Yes.
They're dead for a variety of reasons. Honestly, I'm genuinely surprised that people haven't tried moving her into Kishtar's old niche, which is just I'm going for your caster. Separating her from another perdition caster like Shadow Tongue, she actually cannot land nearly as many of those as like hell as even Broggan can. Like Broggan can trigger perdition more consistently than she can.
Yes.
Even with her amazing feat and all that. She's like maybe a couple of times a game. That's actually not a viable melee premise. But what it is a premise for is like, okay, I'm going to be Fog of War and Crippling Grasp and maybe Windstorm or Carnage, and I'm just going to run a conventional plan against you. But I've also got this like Belcher Quad Bolter Tyrant where if you ever once step out of line, your caster is getting Crippling Grasp and shot to death. Or you can even use that as like an early game dynamics enforcement and just go like, okay, I'm going to run this Jackal. I'm going to perdition this guy. My Tyrant's going to move forward. It's going to absolutely unload on this portion of the board, and then it's going to hit and run out. And I'm genuinely surprised that everybody who was running Sabrith seemed to be running melee perdition plan Sabrith, which is not viable. Versus in the team dynamic, you don't need to be a well-rounded pair. Sometimes you get bust, and having your off list just be I'm going to kill your caster. Sabrith seems viable for that. Probably not as good as Butcher turned out being, but I am just surprised that this play style for her was completely overlooked. And like as an Orgoth player, like why are you trying to play her conventionally? We already know that's bad.
So I think no spoiler alert for what may be coming in the next couple of months, but you might see that start popping up once that Frozen and Forgotten box hits retail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Frozen and Forgotten will help quite a bit. The other thing is, I think part of the reason you don't see that, Alex, as much, although you can make an argument that some of the Polish lists were in that vein of, I have my main plan and then I have my in case of shit, break meta.
Yeah. Well, that's been Poland's secret technique. Like I was saying, they're like time travelers almost, and they've just got wild stuff they're going to do to you.
But I think the issue is when you have high level players, they are looking to play the longer game unless an assassination opportunity is presented to them, and generally they will assume an assassination is not going to be presented to them, which means they're also not actively looking for it.
Right.
I think conceptually, I love the idea of having my main and then having a assassination focused off list. But I play Shard and Old Embry, so I like.
But it's very easy to do.
Kill.
Yeah, it's very easy to do when you have access to Reznikova or Shiris, and Shiris can run a conventional game just fine, and she's got that kill you in her back pocket.
Yep.
I mean, I think this may be one of Conquest's laws at work. Everybody is just a blind spot on the part of WTC players in general is that everybody is most conservative about what he knows best. In that it may be just a strong tendency to play it safe and conventional. And I think this year is just a demonstrator that the people who took calculated risks really had those pay off.
Yeah, for certain. Again, Paddington, perfect example with their nuance. Pulling Ard's list, even Walpertinger.
Mm-hmm. No, Walpertinger was running fairly like, and it's down there the micro choices in their list. You sort of like when your eyes glaze over, you're like, yeah, that sure is a list of whatever faction, and then like you really dig in and like, oh no, this is some very calculated microing for advantage.
Oh, 100%.
Alex, I think, for the back in my day segment of this.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to ask you about, actually, specifically, was this.
When we won the WTC in 2014 or 2015, it was only the second year that the WTC had occurred, right? So we were all still trying to figure out the format and how it worked. And we went in, I was playing Goreshade 2. For those that remember what Goreshade 2 was, basically it was a stealth skew.
He was a bit of a meme for a while.
Oh yeah, no, he was an absolute B or C tier caster. Nobody played him. He didn't get any attention. I was the one idiot that picked him up and played him. So it was a little bit of a dark horse list. So we went into the WTC and we figured out that I had this off meta list and people would drop their traditional Crix drop and then I would play Goreshade and they'd get hosed. And so I was actually offered up as the first list forward many times and then pinchered by 2 anti-Crix lists. And then I would take whatever off the table the rest of the team didn't want to deal with. I remember playing a game. It was either against, again, right? This is a 10-year-old memory at this point. It was either England or Scotland. And he was playing Kador. And he sits down and he says, so your entire list has stealth, except I had a Kraken. And he's like, so everything has stealth. And I said, yes. And he said, and when your warrior models kill my warrior models, of which I have a lot, you make more warrior models. And I said, yes. And he goes, this is a really bad matchup for me. And I said, yes.
Yes.
You picked this matchup. You picked this. You gave yourself this. You guys thought you got a win here, and it ended up being a loss, right? And so that was part of the way that we won the WTC that year was we threw my butt out there, and I had the counter that people didn't see or understand or get. So Alex, I think to your point about being counter meta, I had the counter meta Crix list because everybody had their normal Crix drops and it didn't work here. And it gave us an incredible advantage.
Right. And you're playing a conventional Crix list in the other slot. So if they ever disrespect it, like they do so at their peril.
Yeah, it was Scar 1, you know, dudes.
Yeah, that was my recollection. And she's like the archetypal Crix. Like if you've ever seen Crix, this is it. She's doing it to you.
So it was, you know, but you look at that Scar list and you go, okay, I got to shoot this off the board. And, you know, somebody like, I was gonna say like an old Vlad 1, right? Signs importance, right? Signs importance and guns, right? You just blow Crix off the table. A lot of Signar lists would just shoot Crix off the table. In this case, it was a ton of Winter Core, shoot Crix off the table. Everything is stealthed.
Right. And a lot of people forget that stealth was a much more powerful ability in Mark II because so little ignored it. And like the start of Mark IV, like WTC 23, stealth was an off the chain nutso ability, and it's been getting weaker every year.
Yeah.
Yep.
So anyway, I can be a strong supporter of bringing that counter meta piece, either as a player to help anchor your team, or as an entire team to help, you know, really throw off your pairings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but so I think that's a great transition point. So what do we think we can expect for future years, knowing that there may be some balance changes? Maxim is almost certainly going to get touched, and you know, people are going to start exploring again. And if we propagate forward from this point, we get a lot more anti-armor showing up. What are some broad lessons that we can learn from this WTC specifically? Like, for the love of God, stop playing Moraine in team environments. Or, you know, what can we learn for anticipating and working with meta cycles?
One of the things that we didn't touch on, but was very prominent this WTC, was how well not only the Trike performed, which we did touch on, but how well most of the other Colossals performed. If you look at the top 10 individual players, 7 of those 10 had a Colossal in their list of the 5-0s. And they performed in at least one of their lists, and they performed very well into the meta as a whole. So I think the age of the huge bases is definitely here again.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because we do know from SFG's point of view that they do not want to give, and they do not want to give, and they will not give every army a Colossal. So there's going to be some asymmetry in who gets a huge base and who doesn't. And when it makes sense for the army, they'll have it. And when it doesn't, they won't. Because Gravediggers will not get a huge base. That's already been stated.
Can't exactly fit that on a... There are no parachutes big enough for that.
No parachutes big enough for a Gundam. You can't drop one.
Well, Joe, I'm going to crack back at that one. Do you think that the performance of Colossals may have been a symptom of the fact that people just weren't prepared to deal with big armor and big boxes?
I think it's part of it. I think that's definitely part of it. The other part of it is with Kythos being the primary Crix drop. While there was some Sepsera, there was not as much Sepsera that was ubiquitous and holding back Colossals in the earlier part of the meta. And so with Sepsera not being a factor, I mean, she performed and performed well, but she wasn't taken much. Mm-hmm. I think that had an outsized effect on how much Colossals you saw and how effective they were. I think that was a great read by folks to go, wait, Sepsera is probably not going to be what's taken. They're probably going to go the Kythos skew. If they go that route, my Colossals value goes through the roof.
I also think Steamforged has figured out how to design Colossals and design them well. I think that all of the huge bases that have been released this year are very good, and I don't think that any of them are broken, right? The Trike is very powerful. As a Dusk player, I think the Phantasm is very powerful. I think Crix is going to have fun with theirs once they figure it out. And I do think at this point, I'm hoping that Khador gets to look forward to a big bump to their Colossal in January. Because right now, you're right. I mean, the meta, having a Colossal in one of your lists gives you an armor and box skew, especially because most armies have on their rack a plus armor spell. And so you end up with a armor 21, 22, 60 boxes. And so being able to put that in every list makes sense. Being able to run the defense skews, it makes sense. But I do think we definitely, we're seeing this haves and have-nots. And really, the only have-nots, mostly it's Khador. It's maybe Signar a tiny bit. Yeah, but it's mostly Winter Core. That's just. I mean, they were they the first Colossal, right? Or I know it was. I know it was nasty in 24.
It was the Garlgast and then the Mastodon.
Oh yeah, that's right. The Garlgast was first.
You got to remember the Garlgast came out and was trash.
I remember
the Garlgast is another.
I remember forgetting about it. It was really bad.
Yeah, it's like the Mastodon. It's another half-baked model right now, and probably needs a retouch.
Well, and so I'm excited for January. As they figured out Colossals. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm really looking forward to the redesign specifically of the Khador one to help the Khador players out. Right. But I love huge bases. I love seeing them on the table. They're such centerpieces. They're so fun to play. I want to see their win rates be good, right, Joe? We want to be careful that they're not dominant and OP, but well designed, and I feel like they're doing a good job.
Yeah, I think they're getting there. And then the meta has to adjust to these things being in lists, and it's becoming a very fun meta game. It's a hard meta game to predict because we do have def skews, we do have armor skews available. We should hopefully, Alex, see somebody figure out that red deck wins could also be a viable choice, and we get an offense skew.
Yeah,
and then we're cooking with gas, and nobody's going to know what to play.
Right. Well, yeah, and so much is like it. The evolution of the metagame over the last 2 years really has been dictated by the major departure that the 2024 Steamroller packet was from past paradigms. So like 2023, right, like very end of 2023, right around the time Broggen came out, Big Battle Group Broggen was viable because the scenarios were like, let's rumble in the center and we're gonna cross that middle line and have a big old fight in the middle of the table. 2024 drops. Not viable. Does not work at all. This caster has to retreat to being a gunline caster, and he's been slowly creeping back to like, can I run heavies again?
Please, sir, I'd like to run a heavy.
But like so much of this metagame and why defensive skews are dominant right now is the 2024 experience really was defined by flank play and flank collapse. And we've seen a 2-year endeavor to hedge that up. What will the next scenario packet bring? I mean, my guess is it will probably slow down some. And we will re-enter control and offense not just as a counter, but as a primary play technique, probably come back to the fore. You know, one thing I will say with I call it a rug pull, even though I don't disagree with the decision to admit the late edition Old Umbry stuff. Most like the game moves faster than it used to. There annual updates, which is like these annual updates are like substantial. They're like the Hungerford Faye era of post-pandemic updates where it's like every single one is a big change. And the other is models are getting released at a very high volume annually that we have not seen in a long time. And it's concentrated in things like faction. It's less like an edge tweak here or there and more like, here's a threat you have to adapt to. So like the last 2 years, there have been rug pull moments that have dropped at some point in the year. 2024, it was around May when Syrah fell to a certain extent, and then specifically Kruger and Big Pig came to redefine the shape of the game. And WTC 2024 had March of the Big Pigs, where they were like an unbelievable number of feet long, put edge to edge.
Was it like 75 or 78 big pigs just all in a line?
Yes. There was 118 at the event. And so it wasn't even all the big pigs in that
no, it's just
panorama video.
My God.
Yeah.
It was rude.
But that happened in about May, and it took a while to get to that point of maturity. And then this year, the rug pull happened in September. One of the things for me that I see here and like looking back on my history of experience with WTCs, particularly Mark IV WTCs, is like, don't lock in based on a June-July meta. I mean, like you need to be practicing and refining, but the game changes like faster than one would anticipate. And like 23, I was playing Storm Legion. Over the course of the year, meta turned hard against them. 24, playing Brine Bloods. Over the course of the year, meta turns hard against them. Like, I don't know. You really got to be attentive, and you really got to be thinking to the next step. Like, not just where is this going at my next con, but where is this going in the next 5 months, and how do I get ahead of it? I mean, I don't know, Ryan. How much did you observe either among yourself or your teammates that this trying to lead the ball was going on in selection and decision making?
You're asking about me leading with the Crix pairings?
Yeah, and just your team preparation. How much of trying to anticipate and be ahead of the metagame was there going on? I mean, I understand Mark II moved even slower than Mark III, but like, how much was there in that where is this going and how do we beat it?
I mean, our view, again, right, this is 10 years ago. So our view was play your list player that you're really good at and let's outplay everyone. We all had a list pair that obviously was there to take on the meta. And so we had answers to everything in our lists anyway. So we weren't trying to push skews or anything really ridiculous. And it was as we were evaluating the like list matchups, like how do you like this and how do you like this matchup? That's where we kind of figured out that putting me, like, we would run example pairings back and forth and then try to grade ourselves. And that's where we kind of figured out putting me first as bait. If you'd put the Crix player out and you thought, okay, well, the two most obvious answers to game this matchup were X and Y. And then we look at those and I say, well, I beat X and Y. And like, that's good for us. And that takes that matchup off the table, is how we ended up in that spot. And so, yeah, it was general lists, not trying to over doctor anything, trying to be very mindful of the matchups and the pairings, although I get that people are more adapted to these things now. We weren't running massive spreadsheets or anything like that. So it's because it was early in or early in the WTC meta of its existence. So
well, it's an interesting thing that even then that's still a persistent thing. Like you're looking for edges.
Yeah.
And I would say it's challenging even now, because the WTC, like the game around the team and matchup selection game has reached a level of sophistication. It's still really interesting. And I think, USA Condor is like, I think maybe with the exception of Brad's Decathus list, is the summer meta straight up and down piloted excellently. Like, by and large, not really an attempt to like next level or think ahead, but like this team being at second place, having an incredibly close round against Paddington, and honestly, in my estimation, probably, like one of the top contenders to take it. I mean, I think I'll just reiterate again how strong and broadcasting strength this top four was.
Yep.
But USA Condor is like, just play the meta and pilot it optimally. England Paddington was like, play the edge and pilot it optimally. And it's just really interesting to see the contrast.
Well, and to be fair, right, we were play the meta, and then we had that tweak of my counter list that we kind of figured out partway through. And I guess, not to bring up controversies over my year, but I think we only lost 3 games over the 5 rounds.
Right. There was the one controversy, but yeah, how dominant USA was that year made that controversy remarkably easy to resolve.
So just to explain for anybody that's new and watching, we had a player on our team that was disqualified because he was caught cheating on camera. And it was, it blew all of our minds, right? We had just won the WTC, and then they figured it out after the fact.
Yep.
And so we're looking at this going like, oh my God, what happened? And we had won every round 5-0 or 4-1.
Right.
And so
they disqualify and flip all his wins to losses, and USA still wins.
And that was the thing. I was like, well, just DQ him, like make every win he had a loss, and we still win every round 4-1 or 3-2. And so it was only because we were that dominant that we were literally able to. So we won the WTC with 4 people. That's what it was. We had a player go 0-5, basically. Which insanity, but that was the drama of that year. But playing meta lists with one small advantage was enough to get there.
Yeah. It's really interesting what a balancing act it is. And you're talking about like, okay, back in my day, we didn't run huge spreadsheets. I've not been to a WTC where we weren't running huge spreadsheets. But one of the things that emerges in running the spreadsheets is there's this wild asymmetry that goes on. Like, it's like an Agatha Christie novel. Like, write down the percentage that any given character is the murderer, and if it's a good one, the percentage will not only be greater than 100%, it'll often be greater than 200%. Say you're rating people like 1 through 4. Like, 1 is a disaster, 4 is great, give me this every time. And what you'd expect is like, when you rate somebody a 4, they're going to rate you a 1. And the fact of the matter is, you have this massive asymmetry where the answer is almost always 5 or 6 or more, and people are making these evaluations, either because they know something that you don't, or something that they don't. And it's really crazy to watch that pan out. So, like, one of the baseline assumptions of the WTC is it produces more even matchups. But, like, even given that, especially this year, we see crazy blowouts like that go in one direction. And I think it's that the yearly rug pull was so late.
Yeah. It is an interesting, I know we did spend, while we did not spend the time making the spreadsheet, we did spend an immense amount of time discussing matchups. Mm-hmm. And obviously having a team of 5 guys that know the game as deeply as a WTC is going to, we did mark down, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you going to do here? We had all that stuff. We just did it a little bit more on paper than I guess in spreadsheet. And we certainly weren't running any formulas or models or anything like that.
Oh man, the algorithmic models, boy, have I watched people using those. I have watched that backfire so many times where I'm like, so Terminator style Judgment Day is never coming. If War Machine Beat Boop can't get it right.
I mean, we spent all of our time, it was analyzing lists. It was, how do I play into this? It was what do I need to win this game, and us helping each other through it. And me being gone for 10 years with my WTC resume being so old, I wonder if people spend too much time on the data now and maybe not enough time with the fundamentals of how do I play into this list, right? If Butcher shows up and one of your I never played against Butcher. I wouldn't know what to happen if he, came up upon my pairing right now. And having your team help with those, knowing where your outs are and knowing, right? Because every game has a mini game, right? Yeah. It's one of my favorite parts of War Machine is the mini games. Oh, well, this matchup, you get dumpstered unless you do this, right? And if you're able to do
one spell warded model that is going to use specifically its gallows immunity to start to edge you out by 2 inches that I wouldn't have over on this side of the scenario, and you're gradually going to lose hold of it unless,
Yep. So it's learning those little facets and learning all the little edges in every matchup that we spent a lot of time on. And that's where we brought good lists and tried to be good players that knew all the matchups really well.
Yeah, Brian, you're going to find that still exists in the team format. Team tournaments I've been into. I've been to WTC. I have talked to people who have, and I'm not spilling any secret sauce there. But other team events, knowing the matchups and playing the matchups and understanding what you need to do in certain situations is still a very high priority. As a matter of fact, I am a big fan of very smooth brain matchup processes where you don't have to think all that much about what the pairing process is going to look like and all that arcane wizardry. You think more about what do they have and what am I going to play and what am I going to play if the worst happens and what am I going to play if the best happens and how.
Yeah. There's also something to be said, like, nascent element and sort of what enables that smooth brain play is you don't want to be seeing like when you're at an event like the WTC, you don't want to be seeing a matchup for the first time. One, because that's hard to speculate about, and two, like I often give the example of like my round 1 at the Irish Masters. The first time I went was my opponent's like first or second time playing against Rasheth Chain Gang with Runes of War, and it was my 200th time. you know, or like another example, Ryan, we played each other at LVO, and and both times were Tyrants versus Boomhowler, and the first game went one way, and you know that's essentially for both of us non-repeatable because the second game went very, very differently. And if we were to play that again, I guarantee you the third game would be different from either of the first two iterations, and probably the way the fourth through the 1000th game would go.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to be seeing a matchup for the first time, and then ideally are not seeing it for the second time either. You're seeing it at the point where you have explored the space. And one of the interesting things that you talked about in that like team supportive environment and how you were structuring your conversations is, okay, it's great to practice for the WTC at large tournaments and cons on the circuit. But that practice isn't going to be everything. And preparing for the WTC does take deliberate brain sweat and partners who are willing to collaborate and cooperate with you to reach the third through nth game state that the game is really played on.
Yeah. And that's well said. I mean, your case of our games at LVO, I don't have a Brian Bloods player locally. And so you were, I think, my second game against the faction. And I'm trying to digest all of your rules while at the same time trying to play a coherent game. Mm-hmm. And I was unable to do it the first time. Mm-hmm. And then the second time I was able to play a more coherent game, but then learning occurred on your side. And so round 3, I have an idea of how the game's going to go in my head based on round 2, but you've evolved now, right? And so
I can't tell you how much time I spent thinking about that second game, because I'm like, okay, one, how did I take so much time that I was down to desperation assassination rather than like cruising on attrition? And the other is like, okay, he is going to respond better next time. I won't get the attrition leg up in the same way. Like, he will be withholding models much more carefully to fight the long game.
You broke my brain that second game when you tried to assassinate me. I mean, for good reason, right? It was one of those where I was like, what just happened?
I got 7 minutes. I got to get it done, and killing an assload of cats and guardians ain't happening in 7 minutes.
Yeah, it was a lot to chew through, but it was still a very fun game. It was a good game.
Mm-hmm. All right. We're at about time, but I just want to I guess we lost Joe to something in real life, but I want to give you guys a chance to close out. Any last thoughts on WTC?
I think it was a wild
I see my
one.
Camera stuttering.
And I think a little bit. Yeah, you're stuttering a little. No, I think it was a great event to watch. Always is. I love watching the edge cases edge out the safe plays for the meta. I'm looking forward to seeing what people very badly copy in the months ahead before January shakes it all up. And
that's fun.
Because that's always fun to watch that show up in local events. And then you're like, yeah, but I don't think you understand why they took this. And that's going to be really great to face. And I'm looking forward to, I saw some spice this year, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out in the next few months. Then January is just going to flip it all on its head, and we'll see what happens.
I enjoyed the enigma that was Shadow Flame. I just have no idea what's happening with that faction right now. 2 5-0s.
They're very good.
Well, they're
good. They're good and they're terrible at the same time, and it doesn't make sense. I can't put Jamie and JVM and the population in my brain at the same time. Like Shira said, she in the 30s on win rate. I'm sure it was terrible. It was bad. The faction sucked, except the trike is broken and Jamie and JVM went 5-0, and it was what it was. You know, it's just. So I guess I'm curious to see, because I don't expect Shadowflame to get touched in January. If anything, like, because they're a pretty balanced faction. I mean, they've been mid to low 50s all year. I mean, they seem great until like the last month. And so now what I'm really excited to see is is how the players change and evolve. And Alex, you alluded to that, right? Jamie Perkins' lists were a step ahead of everybody. So maybe Jamie is the meta to be followed for Shadowflame, going forward, sort of thing.
His Sheerus list was a step ahead of everybody else, but what you got to remember about his pair is time is a flat wheel, and his Kyrax list was literally a year behind, and it was perfect for the metagame that existed at the moment.
There you go.
It was so good. I loved it. Oh man. All right. Well, thank you guys for being on. Everyone out there in the audience, thank you guys for watching and for joining us. Please do check the description on this stream for a link to the Tyrants on the Field podcast, as well as Ryan's Spell Rack channel, which is growing gangbusters, by the way. I saw just today you passed 2,000 subscribers. So big congrats on that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's gone very well.
Yeah. All right.
I'm having a ton of fun.
Give him a like, give him a watch, and we'll catch you next time.
All right.
Keith, take us away.